Rich Ting is in the house. Stay tuned as we discuss Man in the High Castle, Season 4, Episode 8.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman, and here with me is Belle.
Yes, I am Belle Blankenship. Happy to be here.
And we have the wonderful Rich Ting.
Hey.
Welcome to the building.
So, Rich Ting plays Captain Iijima on Man in the High Castle. He is also a martial arts expert. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Fair enough.
And you can also see him on Warrior.
Yes.
So, Rich, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you guys for having
Yeah.
me. This is fun.
Yeah. So we're going to dive in and talk about Season 4, Episode 8. But
Okay.
before we do, I just want to ask you a general question.
Okay.
What, it could be with your character or without, what was your favorite moment on the show?
You know what? One thing for all the High Castle fans out there, you know, there's so many people know that there's so many multiple stories going on
Yeah.
at the same time throughout every episode, you know? And so from an actor's point of view, since I was a fan of this show,
Yeah.
which is one of the first shows I've been a fan of before joining it. So for me, it was very epic just to
Okay.
kind of be on set with the whole High Castle world, you
Yeah.
know, so to speak. But I remember one episode in particular, you know, we had a crossover. And it was at the mansion with the auction, I think in episode 2, 3, 4-ish, around there.
Yeah,
Towards
that was
the
at the
beginning.
beginning.
Yeah. And
With Childan.
exactly. And, you know, my character obviously is always with Joel De La Fuente, who plays Chief Inspector Keto. But I was like, you know, because I'm a fan too, right? So I was like, oh, I want to see like Jason O'Mara, and then I want to see Childan, I want to see Brennan, and what do I get to see all these other guys? And they were like, no, because most likely, you know, they're doing their thing while you're doing your thing. But there was one moment where we actually had a crossover, like I said, at this mansion where this auction takes place, where you have, you know, you had Francis Turner there,
Yeah.
you know, with the catering, so to speak, right? And then Brennan was there, Childan was there, and you had Joel, obviously, and then you had Jason, and we were all sitting in our chairs, and just, it was so fun just
That is
to
a
hear
blast.
all these people that I'm fans of
Yeah.
speaking about just life and just, you know, the show, and everyone's joking. And then actually one person, I forget who it was just like, you know, when you're dealing with material like the material in High Castle, where it's so deep and so layered and, you know, at times kind of dark, right?
Yeah.
That you got to have a sense of humor off camera. You know what I mean? You really
Yeah,
do, because
just
it
the balance.
just keeps it going and keeps it the energy up, you know. But then you go into character, and then it gets like this very intense,
Dark.
you know, vibe going on. So that was epic for
Right.
me, just because I was silently geeking out because I'm a fan, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, okay, so this is great working with Joel, because I'm a huge fan of him and what his arc as Keto has done. But now I
Yes.
get to see all these other people right here, and I'm like, this is cool.
So,
awesome.
kind of going off that, Keto.
Yes.
Okay, so we see him, the characters being so serious.
Yes.
What is Joel like off camera? Like,
I mean, I don't really know where to start. All I remember
good or
is
bad?
like, no, in a great way. It's like I remember the first day we actually had a stunt rehearsal for the pilot. There's a little action scene in there, and he arrived while we were kind of in rehearsal, and I heard his voice. I heard a voice. I'll just say it like that. I heard a voice, didn't recognize it, and I was like, okay. And I could hear him talking as he came into the studio, and I turned and I'm like, oh my God, it's Joel.
hero.
And I'm like, why is he talking like that? Because his normal voice
Right.
is nothing like his character voice, and that just threw me. And then he's such a warm guy that threw me even more. You know what I mean? Because he's never. I mean, there might be a speckle of warmth somewhere, you know, throughout the 4 seasons, but like, he's just such a nice, approachable, gentle guy, which is so opposite
of his character.
So that was very cool, because I was like, I like this guy on camera, and now I love him off camera, and I get to work with him for the whole season. So
would you say, just based on the people you've worked with, who you've met, is there anyone, and maybe it's him, that you would want to collaborate with?
Oh,
in the
100%.
future? All of them? Anyone in particular?
I mean, Joel, hands down, just
Okay.
because I have a great relationship with him, obviously just working with him on the show. But then, you know, the cast, I mean, here's the thing. I'm coming off the bench, so to speak, in season 4.
Right.
I'm like, hey,
I know.
put me in, right? And so just to be on the team, let alone to come into and actually play with these guys and the entire cast, they've been together for 3 seasons. You know what I mean? I'm the new kid, so to speak. So, that's awkward in any level, if you're the new kid coming into a well-established family. And they were Chella was so sweet, and Alexa was so sweet, and they were they just welcomed me in. Like it was so smooth that I kind of prepped myself like, okay, I get it.
Right,
cool
right.
kids over there, Rich is over there. You know what I mean? Like eating my lunch, like, hey, what's up?
Right. And
But
I feel like
no.
it doesn't happen all the time on films. I feel like you're right. A lot of times it is kind of this awkward silences. You're just like, which is tough, and I feel like that makes for a better dynamic on screen. And like I
Totally.
feel like you're, obviously you did a fantastic job with your
Thank you,
character,
thank
and
you.
I think that did kind of show. Everyone just looked very comfortable with where they were, who they were acting with. So
Totally. And also I use that, as an artist, I use those vibes, I use those energies for my character, because
Absolutely.
I am a new character, right?
Yeah.
Coming over from Japan. So, I am invading, so to speak, someone else's, space, if you want to call it that. And so even the fact that Joel in character in our backstory is kind of like, okay, what's this guy's motive? What's his deal? Maybe that's what they were thinking in real life. Like, who is this guy, right? And so I it's very cool how things are organic like that, and they can affect me as the actor and as the character. But hands down, man, it was just a pleasure to be with this whole cast and crew, and just to be in this high castle world.
That's amazing. Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
No, that was a great question. Great question.
I just
So-
spurred a lot.
Just to talk a little bit here. So we had when we start episode 8, they fast forward from 7, so we're about a month into
Yes.
when Japan has officially announced they're leaving North America.
Yes.
So we kind of start there, and what I found very fascinating is that how not only so this is a very interesting concept. It's very unique. It's an alternative to our history as we know it, but the fact that they show everything and they show that hey, this wouldn't have been an easy thing. This would have been very, very difficult for people on both sides.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think another, like the opening scene on this one, basically the Reich shows up and they kind of, they ask the JPS if they saved any of the intelligence files.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Right. And
Yep,
then they're like, no, we destroyed everything. So kind of what my question is like, and maybe you can have some feedback too. Like, do you think the JPS, does the JPS hate the Reich more, or do they hate the VCR more? Because it's kind of hard to tell.
I mean, I think when you get this far in season 4, you start getting these. I mean, when you started in season 1, you had Japan and Germany.
Right.
That's it. You had 2 teams, and then you had this newbie in the middle called the Resistance, right? So it was very clear cut. You had A, B, and C, basically, right? And so I think as we get into especially season 4, you start seeing, and if I recall, towards the end of episode 8, I think John Smith gets approached to kind of maybe even divert more, correct?
Yeah.
Not to jump ahead of you guys, but just my point is that there, you start
right.
seeing all these divisions within the division, right?
Yes.
And I think that just, I mean, it sucks because it's the last season, so now you're starting to get all these other doors
I
are starting to
know.
appear, and you're like, oh, what if?
It's like so late
What
though
if?
in the game too.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating too because the BCR, I didn't know that China or Australia was involved.
Yes,
And that's a
yes.
big thing this season too is look at all these other
Yeah.
countries who are going to be fighting against Germany.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's one thing
yeah.
I hope the viewers caught because on set I was like, wait a minute, so you have the Japanese obviously, but now I kept hearing Chinese and seeing it written in the script like Chinese this and with the blacks this, and I was like, I hope the viewers are going to make that distinguish, identify that all the Asians aren't just Japanese.
Right.
Like this is an alternative world.
Yes.
And there's other Asian people in the world,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
With different allegiances and different, just they belong to different regions, so to speak. So that was also very cool because now, because before, like I said, it was Resistance, Japan, Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what about all these other South America, Australia,
Yes.
Asia? I mean, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think, not to call it a cheat, but they brought in these other colors and these other little speckles of nationalities to just kind of
Yes.
complete this whole arc that this is a alternative world and universe,
Because I think it can, sometimes the show can make it feel like it's kind of isolated. Like
Yeah.
it really is just like America and Berlin.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think it's
Totally.
great that they did kind of bring those in. I think it would be pretty cool. We were talking about this on another show if they kind of did like a spin-off. And like maybe you could see like, oh, well, what was China doing
Yeah.
in all of this?
Totally.
So,
There's so
that'd
many
be
direct.
cool.
I mean, it's one of
Yeah.
those shows you can go. I mean, that's why I remember the pilot, of season 1.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
where is this going? And then it started getting sci-fi at one
Yes.
point. So then I was like, oh my gosh, we're going that direction now,
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but yeah, there's just so much. There's so much to cover. But at the same time, one thing that was so impressive, not only being a viewer and a fan, but then being involved with it, is the fact that they basically represent Japan with 3 or 4 characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you represent all of Europe via Germany with like 3 or 4 characters. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And I don't think the viewers really ever got fooled with that. You know what I mean? Because at
Right.
the end of the day, you're like, okay, so you have Japan. Yeah, you have all of Japan, and they cover all this. But then you just have Kido and a couple other admirals and a princess. You know what I mean? And then that's it.
Yeah,
But you
there's
never
Japan.
got the illusion like, okay, so what's the rest of the country doing? What's that was it.
Yeah.
So that was. I mean, I thought that
Right.
was just brilliant on their part.
And it's interesting too because I feel like that alone could be a spin-off.
100%.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah.
what was happening in Japan
Totally.
and actually see the country.
Totally.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But you mentioned John Smith, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
an excellent time to kind of talk about him too,
Yes.
because along with seeing so many different identities, there is still this American identity
Yes.
that, despite what's happened, we still get the sense that John Smith is always going to be an American in
We
some
hope.
way.
I mean, it's John Smith.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
The name
and I don't know
gives
if that
away.
went over a lot of people's heads, just because his acting
point,
and his
yeah.
portrayal is so convincing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then it's like, I can't even pronounce it, but
Yeah.
Grubenführer
Grubenführer.
John Smith. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, even as a viewer, I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then I'm
point.
like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That what? You
It
know what I
was
mean?
so-
Like,
his
Yeah.
name was so like it felt so like American that I
Yes.
almost
Yeah.
wondered if that he had been given that name after the fall.
True.
I had wondered
True.
that.
Yeah,
True.
Like
yeah.
maybe that was to represent that he was going to be in America.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know because I think his name was
Yeah.
always
It
John.
might have
Yeah.
been.
Yeah.
Now, in Europe, what for you has been like the most fun, like watching a character develop? Because we've seen Kido, like we know in this episode, he actually takes a moment to like take a shot with his men. He's like,
Yes.
I made a
Yes,
huge
that's right.
mistake, basically. And then, we've kind of seen John develop. We've seen Helen develop. So,
Yeah.
which character have you enjoyed kind of like watching them develop the most?
I mean, I'm biased because I'm a fan of Joel,
Love Joel.
and I just
That's great.
I mean, I loved it when he took off. I was joking with him on set about this multiple times, actually. I think in season 3 when he takes off his glasses, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
It just got real.
I was like, things just got serious right now
Right.
in a different way. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And so, and that kind of moment you're talking about
Yeah.
on episode 8 when he, I kind of laughed when I saw it because I was like, this is the typical like hardcore Asian father
Okay.
that's like, I know I've never loved you, but I have loved you,
To the
Yeah, and then the kid's like already like 45 years old. He's like, "Thanks, Dad." You know what I mean? It's like one of
I've
those
been waiting
moments.
for this my whole
Yeah,
life.
And so I thought that was like so culturally funny to me because
Okay.
there's so much truth behind that scene.
Yeah.
Especially in the Asian community.
Right.
We're typically traditionally fathers are very strong and unemotional, which is keto. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So the fact
absolutely.
that he gives it up to his guys and just gives them that little bit of
Yeah.
love. Verbally and emotionally,
Right.
and he takes a shot. That's cool.
Cool.
But yeah, you get to see Keto go from this ruthless killer governing guy to like having a romance in season 3
Yeah.
to the glasses coming off.
Right.
Now you got you got a little bit of a tease that he had a family back in Japan, and now you get to meet his kid in season 4. So not that he was getting soft, so to speak, but I just think
Yeah.
I love it when writers give characters of that nature, tough, intimidating characters, a full arc.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the
Yes.
day, they are real people.
They're real people, yeah.
And I hate those one-colored characters where they're just like always like, like
Yes.
I'm the scary guy, I'm the tough guy, and then that's it.
Yeah.
It gives it so much more light and so much more, it's just more believable when you get to see like these moments when even he has his, I call it the tantrum in his apartment, earlier in season 4,
okay.
and then, he has like his
Right.
moment with his kid, and you get to see all these different sides of him, and I think that was great,
And it's interesting because, I'm thinking about the moment in 8 where he ends up in the room where he had previously
Like full
had
circle.
Frank's kids.
Oh yeah, well, that just
Yeah. And he
That was
keeps
good.
looking at the vents.
Yeah,
And
that was a
it's-
great shot.
Yeah. And just going off of what you were saying
Yeah.
too, it's so interesting. Like, bad or good, people are very multi-layered no matter
Yes.
what. And that's part of the problem is that Keto and John, like, even if they had
Yes.
made the wrong choices, it made it harder to dislike them because they had so many moments where they did really good things or they did
Yes.
things that went beyond, or like you saw what they were like, with John as a family man.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Keto, I just loved that moment where he's in the room
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
finally hits him. This is what I did.
Yes.
I mean, I remember seeing that camera push in, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
At the
I
rim.
watch things with a different lens,
Okay.
obviously,
Hey,
because
we'll
of what I do. And,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I'm watching the pushing, right? And I'm watching it, and I'm like, they're gonna keep the vent in the frame,
Yes.
right? And then he goes to I think if I recall right, he looks this way and he ends on the vent,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I knew it.
It was perfect.
It was perfect.
Ah.
The frame. I mean, that's why it's
Yeah.
an Emmy award-winning show. I mean,
Oh,
it's those small little
yeah.
details that are like so powerful.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what an ironic way to end that scene.
And that.
You
yes.
know, which is the room that even if you lost track of all the seasons, you
remember that scene.
room because it's so creepy in the sense that it's so nice and cozy.
Yeah.
And then they shut the door. And I remember, I forget, the kids were playing, like watching TV in
Yeah.
season 1 in that room,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And with their mother.
With their mother. And
Yeah.
they're kind of like, oh, this is great. And they're, and then all of a sudden,
And I love his
Ugh.
face, like when he first, because even the VCR is like, what's this room for? And it has all
Yeah.
the toys. He's like looking around. He's like horrified. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you realize as a viewer where he's at.
Yeah.
And
So,
I didn't think the BCR was going to do this to him, but I almost worried that was going to be his
Yeah.
fate.
Yeah.
Just because he was in
Yeah.
the room and it's like they're calling back to this.
Me
Why?
too.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I was so worried. I was
Yeah.
worried for him. And I guess that's part of it
Yeah.
is that the stakes are high because we know what that room is, even if the VCR
Totally.
doesn't.
oh,
yeah,
man.
I'm just, you guys got me chills.
That's
That's what I'm saying. You know, it's such an intense scene, but it's such a short scene, but yet
Yeah.
it's memorable. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, another thing I was going to ask, because you were just talking about kind of, having Asian parents and
Yeah.
what that's like. And so you are half Japanese and Chinese, correct? So how was it for you kind of to kind of tap into this Japanese character? And then in your own life, how do you kind of balance both of your heritages?
No, great question. One thing to point out, I am half Chinese, half Japanese. At the same time, I am 4th generation Japanese American and 3rd generation Chinese American.
Okay.
So that is a huge, I don't know if it's an advantage or disadvantage, but it's very different in the sense that basically that makes me American.
Yeah.
At the
Yeah.
core, because
Yeah.
my parents didn't grow up speaking another language. We obviously, my brothers and I didn't grow up speaking another language. The only thing Asian about us was probably 2 things. One is no shoes, right? Because my mom
Yeah.
doesn't want to have to clean up
Right.
our tracks, so to speak, right? And number 2, like we have a rice cooker. You know what I
Okay.
mean? That was pretty much
You
the
walk in
extent
and
of it,
exactly
you
the
know?
family.
And so I bring that up because, I because of that, I became so interested, ever since I was a kid in my cultural background. Because it's kind of like this, like the cyclical thing where I'm so far removed from the origin, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
That you have the 1st generation, 2nd generation that are like breakaway generations is what we call it, right? So they're doing stuff where I don't want to speak that language, because maybe kids at school look at me different, or I don't want to eat that because kids are eating this, or I don't want to go to language school, whatever it could be. But see, my parents went through all that. So by the time I was born, I grew up in an American household. So it made me and it motivated me to be like, okay, so where am I from?
Okay.
Right. And I discussed that right now with you guys in answering this question because it took me back to when I was a kid and I used to go to my Japanese grandparents' house, ironically in LA, and I would see photo albums, and I would see just things from the 50s and the 60s, and then I would hear stories from my mom, and then I would hear stories from my Japanese side about internment camps because they were all interned during that period. And so the fact that High Castle definitely works and lives in this era, this post kind of like 1950s era, so to speak, it was very present in me being a fourth generation Japanese American in 2018 or 19, whatever it was, right? And so, a lot of the prep work had already been done,
awesome.
and it was in me, so, when that scene that I talked about, that crossover scene where everyone was there at that mansion, I'll never forget it. I was in one of the cars because I drive in with Keto in one of those scenes, and I remember seeing all the extras line up on the street, and it was cold, so everyone's bundled together. And I remember just distinctively seeing the Japanese women and what they were wearing. Everything from the eyeglasses to the chain on the eyeglasses to like the dresses and the coats and the way the hair was. And it was identical to the old photos I had seen in my family albums and stuff. And then you work your way down and they're wearing Uggs. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. Right? Yeah. So I'm like, all right, so then let's take the Uggs off right before the shot, but like, it was stuff like that was so cool. And then the amount of detail within the different sets. We always joked like, hey, go open that drawer, right? And you open the drawer up and you're like, what's this? You take out a folder and it's a legitimate Japanese document, like with a name. I mean, it's legit. So it wasn't just paper, you know what I mean? And so that's the thing with High Castle is that, the set decoration, the props, like the visual effects and just the accuracy and the depth, it feeds you as an actor, as an artist, because, maybe you don't even know you pick up the cup in the scene for the first time, but that cup is a legitimate artifact. And that's going to affect you a certain way, So not to get sidetracked, but my point is to all this is that I'm Japanese American. I've seen real things happen. I've heard real stories happen about this time period. And my mom's Japanese, and I'm very close with her. And whatever Japanese culture she lacks, I kind of researched and picked up, right? Because she's so Americanized. So, but it was a very special project to be a part of. And it's these kind of shows and these kind of things that I've done in my career that really I think are meant to be. Because when I really think about it, I'm just like, I don't know too many other fourth generation Japanese American kids that are acting, let alone, suitable for this character. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like we were talking before we got on there that, all the prep work that goes into certain things, right? Yeah. Like I've had 30 something odd years of prep. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then they call you and they're like, hey, we love you for this part. And, and then I'm like, I'm loaded, ready. I'm ready to go.
Like fate, yeah.
So kind of going off of this. So the question in my mind, so I'm half Jewish. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is because I feel like for me, I have had moments where I've connected more with my Jewish side versus, the Italian side. So for you, do you find that like that you connect with one side or the other more?
I mean, I think just I'm the oldest of all of my brothers and I, and I've always been a mama's boy, so to speak, and my mom is Japanese, and so I think just naturally I've kind of been more open to the Japanese. At the same time, like, not to bring this up because we're talking about High Castle, but my other show, Warrior, which was obviously based, it was a period piece back in the 1880s or late 19th century about the Chinese immigration to San Francisco and then the gangs that formed from it, so I went to high school in San Francisco. My dad's from San Francisco. He's Chinese American, right? So no matter how much you try to like push away culture or even genetics or DNA, it's all in there. You know what I mean? And so when you ask that question, the quick response is I am definitely, I think, lean more towards the Japanese side. But then I can't deny my other half because it's very alive and it's very present, you know? And so for this show, for that year, I actually did both of these shows. So it was like the first part of the year was the Chinese side, and the second part of the year was the Japanese side.
Pay homage to both sides.
Yeah, I can't wait to play the American side now, right? Like,
three's a charm.
Yeah, that's amazing though.
So, but I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things. Like for me anyway. Like as you were talking, I was like, okay, like because it's sometimes you feel like you're more connected to one side or the other,
Yeah.
depending upon what you're doing or where you
Totally.
are.
Yeah.
I'm sure being around certain family members too, like
Yeah.
yeah.
It could even be as simple as food
Yeah.
too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I just prefer this food over that food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, that's great.
Awesome,
Very
yeah.
cool.
So, kind of jumping in a little bit, like just to talk more about the episode, we have Childan and Yukiko's marriage.
Yes.
Which
yes.
to me is one of my favorite
Aw,
parts
so
of the whole
sweet.
season.
Yeah.
Even though we'll talk about episode 9 later.
Yeah.
But for
Yep.
episode 8, at least Childan and Yukiko had a happy moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. There's a few characters that I feel like Childan's one of them. Like he can never catch a break in
Yeah,
this
no,
show.
you're always rooting for him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and then
Yeah.
side note, you meet Brennan in real life and he's so perfect for that. You know what I mean?
That's
Like
awesome.
he's such a good dude and great conversations and great stories. But I
Yeah.
root for him like as Brennan even.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when you see Childan's arc throughout the whole
Mm-hmm.
show, you know, it's painful sometimes. You know,
It is.
I'm like, oh god, and even with the way he speaks Japanese, you're like, God, he's like
trying
he's one
so
of those
hard.
kids like A+ for effort. You know what I mean? Like
How bad
like
is it?
most
Like-
inspirational, like you know, like biggest
MVP.
comeback. You know what I mean? Like he kills in all those
That's so
awards,
funny.
and then when you see that romance start to form early in season 4, and then it leads up to
Yeah.
their little marriage ceremony in his
Yeah.
store. Yeah, man, that was great. That was a great moment too.
Yeah,
Like you know.
Yeah. Now another thing. So obviously, I feel like justice is a huge theme in the show, and you know your character unfortunately doesn't last. But now, so my
R.I.P.
question is, if your character didn't die that way,
Yes.
how would you have predicted he would
Wow.
have gone out?
You know what? Well, hopefully I would have just gone on a boat
Just-
like everyone else and been like, peace. Like,
Go to
you know, like I think he says, you know, your
Right.
families are missing you. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
my family's definitely missing me.
It's about that
Yeah.
time. So.
I mean, you know, I've kind of become a master of getting shot and, you know, my neck, sliced or
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
But no, I remember. I remember filming that death scene in was it episode 6, I believe. I passed away, and it was freezing that night.
Really?
Like,
Oh,
it was, you know, because we shot this in Vancouver, and
Right.
it was, I think, in like the start of winter, and
What a time to die.
yeah. I mean, I was layered up, you know, but I just remember
Right.
being on the ground and looking at Joel, and you know, the camera's over Joel, and he's just like, you know, and he says it in his accented voice, like, "You will understand someday." You know, and I just was like, "Don't say that to me right now, dude. Like, I'm supposed to be
So
dead,
cold.
like, you know." And he's the, you know, and we were always joking and stuff like that. And I was just like, you know, like, you can't say that. And they're like, you know, they're like quiet, roll cameras, and then he gives me one of these liners, and I'm just like, okay, like the eyes are watering because I'm laughing, and I'm just like, and they're like, Rich, stay still, and I'm like, I can't work in this kind of
Look at
environment,
him.
you know. But yeah, it was you know, I was honored to go out being shot by
That's true.
Keto, so,
Yeah.
you know,
I
it wasn't a
guess maybe it was
stray
the best
bullet by
way,
like one
right.
of the and I'm just
Yeah.
like boom, you know. I would have been like, that's weak, you know.
Right.
Speaking to that too, like just like I feel like that moment is so important. We could talk about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that Keto was able to get the entire, you know, military on his side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a dope scene.
Yeah.
Man. So
Yeah.
honestly, maybe that was the best way for your character
No,
to
and
go.
I mean, here's the thing: season 4, the writers, the showrunners, the producers, they kind of know what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Right,
So
by this point.
that's one thing you get spoiled as an actor when you get on a show like this, because you already feel taken care of. There's
Yeah.
so much trust there that you're like, hey, whatever happens, I'm
Right.
sure there's been a lot of thought gone
Yeah.
into this. You know, rarely do you get on a show of this magnitude and you're like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
rarely happens,
Yeah.
right? So, and I just remember too, like, you know, and I don't know if it was conveyed to the audience, but in that scene, you know, when Joel's standing over me, that moment really is, he sees him in me. You know what I mean? Because the amount of ambition and the
yeah.
amount of loyalty and the amount of like just, you know, my entire mentality was almost like a younger Keto. I keep
Yeah.
wanting to call him Joel, but a
Yeah.
younger Keto, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what younger Joel is about, but that was supposed to be like a younger Keto thing, you know? So when he
Yeah.
actually kills me, it's almost like he understands me.
Yeah.
But then there's also like a sympathetic vibe, which is like, I basically, you know, he was given a chance to kind of evolve as him, right? Why not Iijima, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that was conveyed, but that was definitely the backstory we were playing with there.
That's
you know?
really deep. Because, yeah, I feel like that we talk about every episode, especially with keto, is like we love them one episode, we hate them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it all comes down to just this sense of duty. And I feel
Yeah.
like that was kind of like Iijima. Yeah. So I feel like that really embraced that side of keto and
Totally,
Iijima's
like,
character.
I think he understood what my
Right.
objective was at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
even through all the Tagomi stuff and all that, like
Right.
Keto understood Iijima and what he
Yeah.
was about. And that's why I think it was so hard for him. And that's why I think we stay on him for that little bit of moment
Yeah.
right after that, I get
I didn't
shot.
think about it, but
So-
so for you, how do you think playing this role has helped you grow as an actor?
Oh, well, like I said, every time I have the opportunity to work with this amazing cast, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, individual actors on this show have been up for Emmys and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, I mean, their resumes speak for themselves. I'm always a student on set. You know what I mean? I can't stand it when actors are arrogant and they have a chip on their shoulder, because the reason why I love doing this is because it's never ending learning. It's an infinite amount of knowledge out there that even hopefully I can do this to the day I die, that I'll still be learning.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even with the whole digital world now and the fact that we shoot and we film a certain way, you're learning. I mean, there's OGs in the business that get on set. They're like, "Oh, we never had that." You know what I mean? And then you see
Yeah,
like
yeah.
millennial actors coming up, and that's all they've had. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and that's the technical part of it. But from a creative standpoint, I mean,
Yeah.
we can get into this later. But I'm working with another amazing actor right now who has a resume that goes on for days.
Yeah.
And just seeing him walk onto set. You know what I mean? And seeing him walk into rehearsal,
Yeah.
and seeing him go into his character. I mean, it's what I always call it. I get these special master classes,
Oh, cool.
but I get paid to attend these master classes. You know what I
That'd be
mean?
nice.
It's so
Yeah.
it's so ironic. You know what I mean? Where
Right,
like
right.
I'm on set and I'm just it's so cliche, but you when you talk you can't hear,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I actually try to just listen, because everyone's process, everyone's creative way of doing things, and just to see these people work, people include me in this conversation. At the same time, I feel more of a student, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
because I'm always just ears are open, and what can I pick up today?
Yeah.
Because even when we train, in the studios and our acting classes and whatnot, it's always my goal to just take away one thing, So
that's
if I take
great.
away two things,
you had a big day.
I'm killing, literally. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
but yeah, it was just, I mean, growth is always something that I fully embrace,
Yeah.
especially from the artistic, creative side. And I mean, there's just so much. I mean, these guys have paved the way, and they have so many more years in the business. It's it's a free class.
That's
Like,
awesome.
or not
Yeah.
free. I'm getting paid
Yeah.
to go to class. Like, you know what I mean?
Even better than
So
free
yeah,
class.
so yeah, it's every show helps.
it.
So.
Yeah. Well, so I think that
Yeah.
with the time we have left, it's an excellent
yeah.
time to get into our Q&A.
Okay.
So
Fantastic.
we'd love to ask you a couple questions
Yeah.
too.
Sure.
You had started to mention somebody you were working with.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about that?
if you're able
Yes.
to?
Yeah.
Well, actually, so currently I'm working with somebody, and I actually just finished another show with somebody else. In 2020, I will be coming out in a new show on CBS called Tommy, which features Edie Falco. So I had the
Okay.
opportunity to work with Edie Falco in New York for a little bit,
How
and she plays the first female chief of police in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's
And,
fun. Okay.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about my character
NDAs.
because I'm so NDAs and also personal
Yeah,
NDAs
and for
because
sure.
because this is a character I've never played. I've been dying to play it. I jumped at this opportunity because it was just it's a phenomenal character. And but just seeing Edie work, and she's such a cool person.
That's so
Just great energy. Just open to she's just great. She's one of
Yeah.
those actresses you just show up and you're like, oh, this is
This'll be
gonna be
easy.
fun. Not easy. This is gonna be
sure,
fun
yeah.
because then you got Edie Falco looking at
True.
you, and she's like, what are you gonna give me, kind of thing. And I'm, so
Yeah.
but so that'll be coming out. I think the show starts in February of 2020.
Okay.
Awesome.
On CBS.
on
you said,
CBS.
right? All right.
Cool.
And
Check it out.
Yeah.
please tune in. And the other show that I'm currently working on is a show called The Old Man, which is FX's new show.
Oh, you're
Starring-
busy right now.
Jeff Bridges.
Oh, no way.
So
Okay.
that's the dude I'm
dude.
talking about. So
The Big Lebowski.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
talk
the
about learning.
dude. And he's a gem. I mean, people know that. I mean, Oscar, Golden, whatever. His whole blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
But just to, I mean, he's great. I mean, that's the only word that comes to mind, because it's a master class every day with him, literally.
Wow.
He comes to rehearsal, we do our thing, and I'm like, wow. And he's like, okay, see you later. And he like walks away,
Mouth is still
no big
dry.
deal. Yeah,
So how intimidating though.
Yeah.
So what is that even like, going to set and then, oh hey, Jeff Bridges?
Yeah. Do you get like nervous, or you get more anticipation?
What I always hope when I have an opportunity to work with these huge A-listers that that have all this that have legacies in the business, basically, right, is I'm like, God, I hope they're not the opposite of what it's like they always say, like, you don't want to meet your hero or you don't want to meet your idol, right? So that's always in the back of my head. Obviously it's work for me, so I go in with a certain mentality, no matter who it is. It can be a first-time actor, it could be Jeff Bridges. I'm gonna have the same approach. It's just how I work, and it's how I operate. So but then when you get a person like Edie, or you get a person like Jeff, who just comes in with all this life, and they don't take themselves seriously, you know what I mean? And it's because they've done it for so long, and they're huge stars and fantastic actors and actresses. It makes you love them so much more. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
And I mean, one of the first big names I had a chance to work with was Angelina Jolie back in the day. And I remember, like, I told this story a long time ago, but it's like we had rehearsal and we were in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel.
Yeah.
I'm saying that correctly. In New York, so I'm geeking out because I'm at this amazing hotel that they've a suite, which they completely gutted to put in pads and mats to have our rehearsal in, right? And I remember Ange came up, and she's wearing all black, and she has these boots on, like it was Tomb Raider, like, you know what I mean? Like Tomb Raider just showed up, right?
Yeah.
And she introduced herself to me, and she's like, "Hi, I'm Angelina." I'm like,
Wow.
I'm like,
You're like, my life.
and I'm like trying to be cool about it, I'm like, yeah, nice to meet
Glad
you.
you can make it here today, Ange.
And then she's like, "Thank you so much for helping me with this." I'm just like, oh, and inside I'm like, okay, you can stop, like,
And I had always heard she was nice too.
No, she's fabulous.
Yeah.
But that's just another story of a great actress
Yeah.
and having the opportunity, and then after, like, man, I'll go to bat for any of these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because they've made my experience so amazing. And again, it's another learning opportunity.
Yeah.
So why not learn? It's like going to class. You got professors that are great, but they're horrible. Like, you just like, oh, he's always in a bad mood.
Yeah.
And then you get professors that are in good moods, and you just want to go more.
Yeah.
So it's like that. you
Yeah,
know? So,
absolutely.
it's been humbling and dope, for lack of better words. You know what I mean? At the same time.
So now, of course, like Rachel mentioned earlier, you do have a martial arts background.
Yes.
Yeah, and
would
football.
you? Right.
Yeah. There you go.
Expert.
Yeah.
So, would you like to pursue more roles where you could kind of use those skills, or are you looking more for just the acting?
Yeah, great question again. I think my team and I, we've always kind of promoted me as the actor first, and the martial arts thing, I have a background in it. I've been studying it since I was 4 years old. It's something that I don't necessarily promote. It's just something that, it's a tool I have in my pocket, right? And so when I get called for a show like Warrior, for example, which is a very physical show and it involves a lot of martial arts, I'm able to make the director and the stunt coordinator very excited.
Happy.
Because I've been on the other side where I've had to teach actors certain things, and it's just it's easy when you have a background in it. At the same time, not to get typecast, but then I get to do a show like High Castle where I was laughing because I was like, I don't think I'm gonna break a sweat, literally,
I was
in a good
thinking the
way,
same
in a good
thing,
way,
yeah.
you know what I mean? But then again, the first pilot, the first episode of season 4 that I was on, Dan Percival, our showrunner, who also directed it, was like, hey, can you like hit him like this and kick him like that, And he like gets his eyes get big. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. He's like, cool,
I can make
right?
that work.
He's like, that would be fabulous. I'm like, yeah, I got it, And
that's
so
funny.
I just feel like there's always an opportunity for me to do something, but I definitely don't put myself out there as a martial arts expert. I'm an actor who has a martial arts background, and if needed, I can hopefully provide.
Awesome.
Great answer.
Yeah. So with the time we have left, I just had one more question for you.
Yeah.
I noticed that you had gone to Yale, and
Yes.
one of the things I wanted to ask you is if you, what it was like, basically going there versus do you apply that kind of education to your job now?
Yeah, well, it was great to say
Yeah.
the least. I was able to play football, which was my first dream
Yeah.
to play collegiate football, and we did that, and I did that. Yeah, Yale. I always say, when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, uncomfortable situations are when you have the most growth, and you don't know that at the time because you're a child, literally. So to me, Yale was one of the biggest blessings in disguises because academically it was challenging, but I always say no matter where you go to school, we're using the same books. You know what I mean? It just happens to be at a different location. So with Yale, it really taught me just to be accountable. I have to go to class. You have to show up to go to work. You have to do your research, to do your homework, to do your prep.
Yeah.
So just things like that really have everything to do with the entertainment world because it's a job, and it just, respect yourself, respect others, show up, have a good attitude, and finish, most importantly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rich. So to end the interview then, where can everybody find you?
Oh, yeah, you guys can find me on all social media boards at Rich Ting World.
Awesome. And Belle, where can everybody find you?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram. It is Bebenship, that's B as in Belle, EBENSHIP.
And you can find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman or on Instagram at Rachel Radner Author. Thank you guys for tuning in. It has been amazing. And Rich for being
Thank you for
here.
having me.
Thank
This was
you.
fun.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.